We want to be a leading organization in biblical worldview training for cultural transformation. Thank you for standing with us as we seek to stop the erosion of godly values.
Welcome to Today's Issues, offering a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network for this Thursday, February the 1st, 2024. Thanks for listening to AFR Live Radio Show here for the next hour and 24 and a half minutes. Joining me in studio is Ed Battagliano. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Tim.
Fred Jackson.
Good morning.
Christopher Woodward.
Hello.
So, back from your, what do you have, a 3-day break there?
3-day break, yeah. Spent a couple of days down in Destin, Florida. I think you know where that is, Tim.
Destin, Florida. That's my happy place.
Yeah.
Did you call it Destin?
Destin,
Destin.
Florida.
Oh, okay.
That was my
Canadian
destiny.
pronunciations.
Yeah.
But I joined about 3 million others from Minnesota.
It was crowded.
Every second car I passed, they put their tags,
Yeah.
license tag, on the front of the car.
Yeah.
So you can see this.
Right.
I'm not exaggerating.
Yeah.
And I stopped for gas on the way back yesterday. Guy pulls in, older couple from Minnesota.
Yeah.
They left the Twin Cities on Monday, headed for anything's better than Minnesota
This time of year.
this time of year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still cool this time of the year. But hey, listen, you can't beat the hotel rates.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good time of the year to go.
Yep.
Unless you
I
don't
could-
like people from Minnesota. And
I
you're
could
in
give
trouble.
you some restaurant advice for Destin next time you go down there.
Yeah. I go for fish places.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Fresh
Fish-
food, fresh
oh.
Gulf fish. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yep.
There's millions of people that vacation from, it's what they call the Emerald Coast, from, I guess you would say, Panama City Beach to Gulf Shores.
Yeah.
That's they call it the Emerald Coast. They really call it the Destin 30A down to Panama City. But I just know from all over, probably as far as Iowa. Now you're saying here in the winter you have snowbirds come from Minnesota,
And from Canada, Ontario. So a lot of Ontario
Right.
plates.
but from people from Dallas, Houston, all the way to Oklahoma City, Kansas City, St. Louis in the summertime. Even some from Ohio in the summertime. We live close to the interstate, and there's a Love's truck stop there.
Mm-hmm.
And from May, June, July, and August, do not go there on Saturday or Sunday because you can hardly get in because the vacationers are coming and going.
Yes.
And they're all going to the Gulf Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the East Coast, you have Myrtle Beach and Hilton Head, and of course, Florida has beaches on both sides of their state. So it's a hot spot down there. Millions and millions of people.
The water's beautiful. I'm not getting paid by the
Right.
Florida Tourism Board, but the waters along that coastline are the clearest that I think I've ever seen at a beach.
That's why they call it the Emerald Coast, because of the emerald water.
It's beautiful.
It is.
But
It's like the Caribbean.
Yeah, but the water was still a bit cool. But I saw two guys out at 6:30 the other morning, shortly after sunrise, out there swimming.
They must have been from Minnesota.
I don't know
And
where
it was
they're
hot.
from.
That would have been hot water for them.
I'm
just
going to say I haven't been in the ocean since 1975 when Jaws came out. not above.
We're going to need a bigger boat.
Well,
not
Ed,
up,
the great
above
thing
my
about
knees.
swimming in Destin, you can actually see the shark coming at you.
That's right. It's clear.
If you've ever seen me swim, you would know it doesn't matter if I can see it. I'm not getting away.
Hey, my brother, 8 years younger than me. Anyway, this is about 20 years ago. He went to the Destin, Florida, with his buddies.
Yeah.
And they were swimming, and they went out to the sandbar, which was about, 50, 100 yards off the beach, where you could swim through deeper waters, and then you come to a sandbar and you can stand up.
Yeah.
So he said, so we got out there, and his buddies went ahead of him. He stayed for a few minutes, and he said, then I started back. This is him talking. He said, I started back, and I got about 10 yards out there, and there was a shark dorsal
fin. Yeah, dorsal fin.
He could see it between him and the beach.
Oh.
And so he swam back to the sandbar. Yeah, and I guess waited 30 minutes or whatever, and then risk it all.
Wow.
Back, but he said it was terrifying.
That doesn't make me think that it's wise to change my mind.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever been stung by a jellyfish?
No.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we just went from Jaws to a jellyfish,
Yeah.
Chris, in terms of your fear.
Oh, no, I'm not scared of them. It is painful.
No, you're right. You're right.
I've heard people say it's painful enough that they wouldn't mind being eaten by a shark afterwards.
Just kill me now.
Jellyfish. Oh, those jellyfish tentacles, too. They break off. You can't see them. You can see a jellyfish coming at you. All right. Listen, Travel Channel. We'll do more of that later on, but
Bizarre Eats with Ed Vitagliano.
I used to like to watch. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I used to like to watch that show. Mm-hmm. That guy that traveled the world finding exotic foods. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. What was his name?
You talking about the guy that passed away, or Andrew Zimmern?
The bald-headed guy.
Bizarre Eats was Zimmern, Andrew Zimmern.
Yeah, him. All right, you're listening to today's issue. Sandy Rios, our good friend Sandy Rios, very popular with our AFR listeners. She will be with us at the bottom of the hour. She has a podcast exclusively at afr.net. Sandy does 3 times a week, and we're going to talk to her about that and maybe some other things. But what is your first story, Chris?
Well, Lloyd Austin is back at his post this week as Defense Secretary of the United States. And today he held a press conference in which he began to talk about his recovery from having a prostate procedure that led to an infection and then several days in the hospital.
An infection with a prostate?
An infection, yes.
Oh, an infection.
After the procedure.
I thought you said he had an infection for it.
Now, so he had a press conference today, and he began talking about how he's still in recovery. He's still experiencing some pain. And then he went on to say that he didn't handle his procedure in his long absence from the Biden administration the right way. The president had no idea any of this was even happening, according to various news reports. So here's what Lloyd Austin had to say this morning, clip 15.
We did not handle this right, and I did not handle this right. I should have told the president about my cancer diagnosis. I should have also told my team and the American public. And I take full responsibility. I apologize to my teammates and to the American people. Now, I want to make it very clear that there were no gaps in authorities and no risk to the department's command and control. At every moment, either I or the Deputy Secretary was in full charge. And we've already put in place some new procedures to make sure that any lapses in notification don't happen. In the future, if the Deputy Secretary needs to temporarily assume the duties of my office, she and several White House offices will be immediately notified, including the White House Situation Room. And so will key officials across the department. And the reason for that assumption of duties will be included in writing.
Now, he mentioned how there was never a lapse. Somebody was in charge his entire time that he was gone. But there were various news reports immediately after it was made known he was AWOL, that his underlings, one of them were sick and one of them was on vacation. So somebody's not telling the truth.
Destin?
Mm-hmm. I don't know about Destin. I think in Puerto Rico.
It was it was one of those.
Listen, okay, two things right there. Who you heard there, ladies and gentlemen, was Lloyd Austin. He's the Secretary of Defense. That's a cabinet-level position under President Biden. And what he did, if you missed the story, was he went into the hospital for cancer treatment, as he's talking about right there, and he didn't tell Biden that he was going to be out. And so you have the Secretary of Defense, a big position in any administration, and he doesn't tell his boss, the Commander-in-Chief, that he's going to be out of commission. So he's apologizing for that, as well he should. Whether I don't guess Biden's going to terminate him or he would have already. No. But I did appreciate the apology. He did man up there. However, he said we're putting new procedures in place, and I'm thinking, you don't need any new procedures in place. You just need to tell the president when you're not going to be on the job.
Just follow the old procedures.
Yes.
Yeah, he acted like there were new procedures in place to prevent me from doing this again. That's
Well, that is exactly the way I took it. If you're going to man up, and we did say, as we were watching all the major inside our studio here, we have feeds from 4 different television news outlets. Right. They were all covering this at the same time. And we all said, good for him. He's admitting that he was at fault. But then when you follow it up with, we've put new procedures in place, it almost implies that the procedures were at fault,
right?
And there was some mix-up.
Right, it did. That was the way I took it. I was saying, you don't need any new procedures, dude.
Yeah.
At one point during this news conference, he was asked, the reality is, if this had happened at a lower level, people responsible to you, Mr. Secretary,
yep,
everybody knows they would have been fired.
Yep.
Right.
That's true.
And he stated very emphatically, I have no intention of resigning.
Right.
He wasn't asked, and he has no intention of resigning. They really blew this.
Yeah.
He really blew this.
Yeah.
This is scary. We're not talking about a commerce secretary.
Right.
Away from. This is the defense secretary.
Right.
And the fact that Joe Biden, I think it was at least 3 days, did not know that Austin was in hospital.
You would. I know that's shocking, and you would think that in the current situation we're in across the globe, that
yes,
the commander-in-chief would be on the phone, at least on the phone, if not in person, with briefings from the Secretary of Defense.
Every day.
Well, daily or at least every 2 or 3 days.
Most presidents get a daily
briefing.
Probably
from National Security Advisor.
Policy, yeah. But that's probably true.
Yeah.
That may be true.
But anyway, all right, so that's what happened this morning. Next story.
I have a lengthy clip here. It's 90 seconds long, but bear with me because today was the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. President Joe Biden was there along with First Lady Jill Biden. And the president began by thanking people for their prayers, and he went on to say that it's great to be with so many people together in prayer. Then he goes into his speech, and here's what you're going to hear. He mentions the service members, the American service members that were killed in Jordan, and then he goes on to push something controversial in Israel that we talk about from time to time on this program. Clip 14.
Our prayers continue to be with the families of the 3 American servicemen killed and attacked in the FOB in Jordan. I spoke with each of these families separately, and Jill and I will be tomorrow at Dover Air Force Base to receive the dignified transfer of their bodies. They've raised their lives in harm's way. They risked it all, and we'll never forget the sacrifices and service to our country that the dozens of service members who were wounded and are recovering now. I also see the trauma, the death and destruction in Israel and Gaza, and understand that the pain and passion felt by so many here in America and around the world. We value and pray for the lives taken and for the families left behind, for all those who are living in dire circumstances, innocent men, women, and children, held hostage or under bombardment or displaced, not knowing where the next meal will come from or if it will come at all. Not only do we pray for peace, we are actively working for peace, security, dignity for the Israeli people and the Palestinian people. I'm engaged in this day and night and working, as many of you in this room are, to find the means to bring our hostages home, to ease the humanitarian crisis, and to bring peace to Gaza and Israel, and enduring peace with 2 states for 2 peoples.
So I had to cut it somewhere. He went on to say that we all need to stand together in unity for Ukraine as well. Bottom line, it's a prayer event. He made it into a political thing and pushed a 2-state solution.
Couple things. One is I've been to that event twice, the National Prayer Breakfast. It's not what it used to be. It used to be for Christians, genuine Christians. He's not. Biden, I know some people are saying, how dare you judge his faith? You don't know him.
They don't either.
Well, I can judge him by his testimony and his works and his deeds and his words. He is not a faithful Catholic. the Catholic Church teaches that abortion is a mortal sin. Am I right, Ed?
It does.
And he promotes a mortal sin, and it's the taking of innocent human life in the womb. And Catholics and Catholic teaching is diametrically opposed to that. So I have a friend of mine who is a devout Catholic, and he says that Biden's a false Catholic. That's what he said. So what I'm saying is, I know your focus is on his remarks more, but I'm just telling you that used to be a prayer breakfast led by people who genuinely followed Christ, and now it's become more of a. I would like to know from Biden. Give me why don't you pray for him right here and now? Let's hear you pray for these people, because people throw the word prayer around.
Right.
Oftentimes, I'm going, what God are you praying to?
Right.
So anyway, I don't know why I felt the need to say that, but I have been to that event, and it used to be a wonderful event. So the remarks there he made at the end, is that what you wanted to focus on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a prayer event, and he pushed a two-state solution. Like, there's a time and place for that, I would think some Americans might say.
Are we even talking about the way he slurs his words anymore? He is just.
No.
I guess it's a given, isn't it? No point in talking about it anymore. But that's reflective of his dementia or whatever kind of mental problems that he's suffering from because of his age.
Yeah.
But the two-state solution, is that what he's talking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He's going to Michigan later today.
Yeah.
And our protests are expected there because there's a very large Muslim population. He's going up for a UAW event, United Auto Workers event. But it's really interesting. Just before I came in the studio, the Associated Press put out a story that while Biden is in Michigan later today, the White House is going to issue an executive order targeting Israeli settlers.
This is bizarre.
In the West Bank who've been attacking Palestinians. Well, first of all, the settlers there don't just willy-nilly attack Palestinians in the West Bank. It's usually in response to an attack from them. But I'm a little confused. A president of the United States issuing an executive order against Israeli settlers? He has no authority over Israeli settlers.
I know.
But this is an appeasement thing because he's going to be up there. He knows he's going to face protests by Rashida Tlaib people up there. And so this is just this little candy to throw out there.
Yeah.
Well, this new directive, I'm looking at a CNN story on this subject, will impose sanctions on several individuals accused of having participated in the violent acts. Now, these are sanctions against Israeli settlers. I don't know what the mechanism for this is or the authority of the executive order. The president of the United States has no authority, zero authority over the citizens of other national states. And what does it mean we'll impose sanctions?
I know.
Is he going to freeze their bank accounts?
No.
Is he going to? Are these Israeli citizens that are owed money for doing something here in the United States, and he's going to unilaterally freeze those without any trial?
Yeah.
This goes to the heart of the totalitarian direction of this administration.
Good point.
In about 2 weeks' time, he has done a lot of political things which just so happen to come during an election year. For example, he delayed consideration of new natural gas export terminals, citing climate risks. Okay, that flies in the face of something he pushed for in 2022, saying we need more natural gas export terminals to help Ukraine and our NATO allies. So he's trying to please young environmentalists that are upset that he approved an Alaska oil project called the Willow Project. It's a ConocoPhillips thing. He also pushed abortion rights a couple of weeks ago in Virginia and said Donald Trump is the reason you can't have an abortion.
Yeah.
The list goes on. All of this stuff is not because he cares about or wants to do something to make America better. It's because he's running for re-election this year, and this is another example.
Yeah. Well, he does have a lot of the people on the far left really upset with him over any support of Israel.
Right.
Is going to make them angry. And, when Israel decided, which is a decision they didn't have to think about to respond to the Hamas murdering, what was it, 1,200 of their citizens, and then what? Immediately the left started saying ceasefire,
Right.
and then Biden, to his credit, initially supported
Yes.
Israel very vocally, and then he began to backpedal because of the criticisms, as I say, from many in the Democratic Party, not just the far left, but many in the Democratic Party, and also the Democratic Party is at odds with itself because they have a lot of Jewish supporters.
The Democratic Party is also part of why the state of Israel exists today, because Harry Truman is the one that put it there.
Yeah.
And now they're talking about splitting it.
Well, I don't think there's not going to be any quote Palestinian state anytime soon. Probably in the next big after what Hamas did. You just can't. You cannot allow an official state that's going to be drive you into the sea, you Jews, and that's going to be a sovereign state bordering Israel.
Right.
That's not going to happen, huh?
Yeah. And the structure, the boundaries, as it were, of these this so-called two-state solution really puts Israel at a disadvantage in terms of cutting the nation in half. It's not like there are two blocks.
What are you going to do with Jerusalem?
Straight next to each other. There's like these, it almost looks like when you gerrymander a district, they take it's strange shaped. And I think the narrowest part of that in Israel is just a few miles in width. And you could, if you had another 1973 Yom Kippur, surprise attack, you could sever the nation in half without Israel being able to stop it.
Yeah. Israel gave the Palestinians, the Arabs there, Gaza.
Yes.
The Gaza Strip. And they could have made a lot more of that than they have. I'm talking about its own coastline, the beautiful Mediterranean Sea coastline. They could have done a lot more. The Palestinians, could have to build that up, to make that more of an attractive place for business and commerce and tourism, but they haven't. Now, granted, let me go back just a minute, and let me explain to everybody what settlers are, Israeli settlers. Having been to Israel 25 times or whatever it is, lost count, I know about this situation. Okay, what I'm about to explain to you is how Arabs in Israel see this issue. Okay, there has been talk of a two-state solution forever, right? For a long time, we've been hearing about this. All right, so in the West Bank, which is operated by the Palestinian Authority, but in Israel, so Israel has the last say, over it, even though they let the West Bank, the Arabs, basically they govern themselves for the most part. They will only go in there when they need to find terrorists or when they necessarily have to protect their citizenry in their country, Israel. Does that make sense? You follow me so far? All right, so, but in this West Bank, which is the place where a lot of Arabs say, some Arabs say, and some of the Arab world say would be the place for a two-state solution, the lines to be drawn. Israel is building settlements. They are building settlements.
The West Bank.
In the West Bank, where Jews, Jews because they're running out of room to build places for these people to live, because Jews are coming there from all over the world. You understand me?
Right.
So when they say these settlers are on land that is supposed to be part of a two-state solution, that's what they're angry about. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So now, I guess the Israeli Jews would say, we're out of space. This is our land.
We were here first.
And we're gonna build here if we want to.
Yep.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it gets that's the tension that exists over the settlements that are being built on what's called the West Bank.
Right.
So that is, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, should the Lord tarry, guess what? 100 years from now, when my grandson is maybe on the radio here talking about this, he's going to be talking about this very same thing.
And COVID-19.
A two-state solution
Yeah, it's never
was proposed.
The Jewish Muslim problem is never going to go away.
Right.
I'm sorry to say.
Not by human ingenuity.
Right. And Israel, the country of Israel, the nation of Israel, by the way, is made up of 20% Arabs, many of them Muslims, most of them Muslims.
Some Christian, though, Arab Christians.
Yeah, some Arab Christians.
Arab Christians there, too.
We'll be back momentarily with more of today's issues on American Family Radio. Stay with us.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
When life deals some people a hard blow, they cry and quit. When life deals others a similar blow, they grit their teeth, dig in with determination, and defeat their defect. History records many such cases where people have overcome tremendous obstacles en route to success. One such example is known by many school children the world over. It's such an inspiring story that it's worth sharing. There was a young Greek boy whose father was very rich. But while the boy was still a lad, his father died, and his wealth was entrusted to 3 guardians. These men proved dishonest and wasted the boy's inheritance. So he knew what it was to grow up absent his father's wealth. This young boy had one burning desire. He wanted to become the greatest speaker that Greece had ever produced. His desire made him look foolish in the eyes of other people because it was the worst possible profession, they thought, for which the boy was suited. The boy's voice was so soft and weak that even in a conversation, people had a difficult time hearing what he said. Many people said his voice was unpleasant and that he spoke in an awkward manner. And to further complicate matters, the boy stammered very badly. He could not even recite a poem without hesitating and stumbling so that people laughed at him. But this young boy practiced. Day after day, month after month, year after year, he practiced. He would climb mountains while practicing his speaking, and in the process he was developing his lungs. Often he would go down to the seashore, put pebbles in his mouth, and practice speaking clearly over the roar of the ocean waves. Before long, his weak voice had disappeared, and he could make himself heard above the roar of the ocean or the noise of an angry crowd. As a young man, the people of Greece recognized him as one of the greatest speakers which they had ever known. Not only could he speak loud and clear, but he could move his listeners to the emotional level he desired. So magnificent was his speaking ability that he could make his audience cry or laugh whenever he so desired. His ability to persuade people practically knew no limits. Many times in life we sell ourselves short, give up too easily. Many times, with hard work and dedication, we can accomplish a goal which seems impossible. Life is kind to a person who has a dream and is willing to put forth his best to make that dream come true. Some 360 years after the death of the man who overcame severe obstacles to become the greatest Greek speaker, a Nazarene carpenter told a group of his followers, "If you have faith as big as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Go from here to there,' and it will go. You can do anything." Well, there have been countless people who have taken that carpenter at his word, and the world will never know how many mountains these people have moved. If life has seemingly cut you short on talents, don't give up. Set your goal and pursue it with the most dedication and ability you have. It will pay a handsome reward. The greatest Greek speaker was Demosthenes. If you've never heard of him, look him up. It's a story worth reading.
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
In him we were also chosen as God's own, having been predestined according to the plan of him who works out everything by the counsel of his will, in order that we, who were the first to hope in Christ, would be for the praise of his glory. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11 and 12.
American Family Radio. This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
Hey, welcome back to today's issues on the American Family Radio Network. You're listening to AFR. Tim Wildman here with Ed Vitagliano, Fred Jackson, and Chris Woodward. Hey, one other thought on our conversation about Israel, and we were based on Biden's comments. He's going to Michigan tomorrow, and there's a big Arab population there. One other thing about Israel has about a 20% Arab citizen population. I mean, these aren't outcasts. These are people who live there, work there. My tour guides that I've been using forever are brothers, and they're Arabs from Nazareth, and they're Christians, but they're Arabs, and they love living in Israel. And I remember seeing a survey. Let me put it this way: they love living in Israel. They love the land. They have no desire to leave they consider it their home. Right. You know what I'm saying? And I remember seeing a survey about 3 years ago of Arabs living in Israel, and how a majority of them, if not, it may have been a substantial majority of them, when surveyed, said, would you rather live in Israel, which is a Jewish state, or would you rather live in a Muslim country like Saudi Arabia or Egypt or somewhere else like that? And they said that they voted they would rather live under Israeli. Right. Under the Israeli government. And furthermore, these Arabs can participate in politics. So they are a part of the Knesset, which is the equivalent of our Congress. They serve in the military.
And women can drive.
Yeah. Yes, I know. So the women in Israel, the Arab Muslim women have rights that they don't even have in Muslim countries. Right. So they like the, quote, westernization. Right. Which is why, quite frankly, you have the huge migration into Europe from Northern Africa and other Middle Eastern countries. So what are the Muslims doing? Most of them, they want to flee their own country, the migrants I'm talking about, and they want to go to the land of the infidel. Right. Religiously speaking here. I'm talking about Western Europe in particular, which is Christian. Right. Christian historically. There's like 7 Christians left in Europe, I think. Real Christians. I'm just kidding. But so you wonder, why would these people want to leave their own countries, which has Sharia law or has Muslims, and go to a place where the infidels rule? You know, it doesn't make any sense, except that even these folks enjoy freedom. Right. And so I was just pointing out that the Arabs who live in Israel, while they have, differences with the Jews, obviously, and they get into arguments and fight sometimes, and something will flare up on the Temple Mount, but by and large, they get along really well. You go to Israel, they're very fluent in both languages. Most of them are fluent in 3. I'm talking about the Arabs and the Jews. They're fluent in Hebrew and Arabic and English. Yeah. Most of them. So anyway, and again, I don't know what you do with the Temple Mount. The Israelis understand that the Temple Mount, that's in the hands of the Muslims. I'm talking about where the Dome of the Rock is, which is the third holiest site in Islam. And if the Israelis try to take that over, the Temple Mount, you want World War III? Here we go.
Right, right.
You know what I'm saying? And so, but they do have the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall there, which is right adjacent to the Temple Mount, which the Jews, that's their holy site now, one of their holiest sites in the world is the Temple Mount and the Wailing Wall. So anyway, but the Muslim Jewish back and forth is not going to go away in our lifetime,
right?
That I can see. But
unless Jesus returns in our lifetime.
Yes, but you still want to work for peace and stability in the region because that's good for everybody.
Yes,
right. That's good for everybody. But you do have the problem with the Hamas is that Hamas wants to kill every Jew, and that's their written goal, and drive them from the river to the sea. So Israel can't negotiate with somebody who their only thing that they desire is to have every Jew dead.
Right.
And furthermore, they educate their children at a very young age to hate Jews. I mean, it's like us learning the alphabet in elementary school. They have the alphabet, and then they have, okay, turn to your book about how we want to kill Jews.
Right.
Third graders.
Right.
Here in Gaza. And let's focus on this for about an hour.
Yeah.
You know, you think I'm kidding?
No, they show them in
their well-known. They train them in cartoons,
right?
Books, school, everything like that. Yes.
Tony Perkins on Washington Watch yesterday had a member of the Knesset on, and he said, "You want to know how they do math in Gaza?" The teacher will say, "Johnny killed 3 Jews.
Right.
Another guy killed 4 Jews. How many Jews are dead?"
Right.
That's how they do math.
So it's easy to sit over here in America like Biden's doing right now saying we need a 2-state solution when that's what Israel's facing.
Right.
Is their annihilation. People who want to kill them.
Yep.
And murder them and drive them when they say from the river to the sea, they're talking about the Jordan River, driving the Jews from the Jordan River into the sea of the Mediterranean Sea. In other words, eliminating them. Yeah. That's what they're talking about. All right, you're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Tim, Ed, Fred, and Chris. Well, we have a podcast on American Family Radio many of you listen to, Sandy Rios 24/7. And Sandy joins us every once in a while to talk about whatever we want to talk about, including her podcast. Sandy, good morning to you.
Good morning, Tim and Ed and Fred.
And Chris.
How are you guys doing? Oh, Chris.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Hi, Chris.
Chris.
It's nice to talk to you guys. Always nice to hear your voices.
Well, thank you very much. So, you've been doing the podcast now, how long, a year?
Yes, it's been just about a year. And we've got such great topics, Tim. In fact, and I would say everywhere I go, I was in Fort Lauderdale weekend before last, people come up to me and say, "What happened to you? I listen to you all the time on radio. Where did you go?" And so it's really hard to connect once you leave the network. And I appreciate you giving me a chance to just say to people where they can find it. It's a podcast. So you can find it anywhere you find podcasts. So it's Sandy Rios 24/7. And what are we talking about? Well, last week we talked about big intel, how the CIA and the FBI went from Cold War heroes to deep state villains. And this was with a guy who's a former CIA asset. It is a great book. It's doing great right now, by the way, on Amazon. But anyway, Mike Waller has a lot of information and a lot of insight about what's going on with those agencies. So that was fascinating. We also talked about the invasion at the border. I found out such more incredible stuff, Tim.
Sandy, I want to ask, so, as Sandy said, anywhere podcasts are found, you can find Sandy's most places. Obviously, at AFR.net's the easiest place for us to recommend. You go to AFR.net, you click on podcast, and then you'll see the banner for Sandy Rios 24/7. And Sandy provides 3 podcasts a week. So those are interviews with people like she just discussed, various and sundry topics. that you'll find of interest. And so check it out, Sandy Rios 24/7. Just go to afr.net, click on podcast, and you'll see this banner there, and you can listen to any of Sandy's podcasts. Sandy, when all of us grew up here, we revered the FBI and the CIA. And I know many people, growing up, you want to be a police officer or maybe an FBI agent.
Right.
And Bruce, your husband, Bruce Rather, he was an FBI agent for many. How long did Bruce serve in the FBI?
26 years. I think it was 26.
26 years. Left a few years ago. But you said these agencies, CIA and the FBI, what happened to them? Why are they viewed adversarially by conservatives in America who used to, as I say, revere and respect and have great admiration for these agencies, namely the FBI?
Well, a couple of answers there. I think basically they've sort of turned their sights on Americans, and they're using their great intel capacity to turn on Americans. How many people have had these knocks on their door in the middle of the morning or in the dark? Catholic fathers, school board members, parents that are active. It's really frightening. That's why the FBI and the CIA brought this on themselves. But how did they turn? Well, I think, Tim, one thing that we know about the left, they have a strategy. It's called the long march through the institutions. It's not like overnight revolution, not even insurrection. It is a long march through all of the institutions, through the professional societies of doctors, through the professional societies of attorneys. It's in the judiciary. They have plans for if it's football. It's football. It's everything that is American that we identify with is being infiltrated. It's strategic and it's on purpose. So the FBI and the CIA have not been immune from that. And there have been terrible leaders that have put in place some terrible people to implement that strategy. And I'm not saying everyone knows that's participating, but I can tell you that's exactly what's happening. The FBI is so bad now that they, wokeness and proper pronouns is what they are emphasizing. They are not protecting this country. It's so dangerous, Tim. And so that's pretty much, what's happening there. In a brief response, that's the answer.
Do you think, and I know we were talking about your podcast, you actually dealt with this, how the CIA and FBI went from Cold War heroes to deep state villains. So that's another reason to check out Sandy's podcast. But do you think those two institutions can be reformed, or do you think they need to be scrapped and we need to replace them with something different?
Well, there are different views on this. I mean, of course, Bruce and I we talk about this a lot, and this does come up on the show often because, this is his agency. He was so proud to serve it. It was the creme de la creme. I mean, all the agencies. There's a joke, what does a Secret Service agent and an FBI agent have in common? And the answer is they both wanted to be in the FBI. That's the way it used to be. The FBI was the creme de la creme. They had to be attorneys or accountants, and they were vetted so carefully. So why am I telling you this? Because it's become such a heart-rending thing to watch them leave the camp. I don't know if they can be turned back. It's like the military. Military is off the rails, and they have been purging, good people now for several years, starting with Clinton, actually, and then carrying on through Obama. And so, and the people that really are righteous, and by that I don't necessarily mean godly, although I do mean that, but righteous in their love of country and wanting to do what's right, are being purged and punished. And so, like some families, have generations of people who served in the military. That is their thing as a family, proudly. The kids are not going in, and they don't want their kids to.
Yeah.
So can we get that back? Only God knows. There are a lot of people on the FBI that want it completely disbanded. And, it may be true because I know that now so much terrible recruitment has taken place so that agents are not friends to the American people. They aren't. Some of them, I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying the new recruits. They recruit them because they feel they have certain feelings about the left, about wokeness. They're all in. And so the numbers are shifting, and some of the older agents, of course, are leaving. They've retired early, so I don't really know about that. Could I just say something else practical about the podcast?
Sure.
You sure
Yeah.
may.
Yeah, we have a brand new website, and we've had. So I wanted you to know it just went up actually, and so on that website you can sign up for our mailing list, which is a way for people to know where I'm going to be, and if you can come see me, that would be wonderful.
Even FBI agents.
Yeah, even FBI agents,
Okay.
you'd be surprised. Yeah, they're kind of a lonely breed, so they do seek us out,
Right.
for therapy. But anyway, and that's a way you can book me for an appearance or whatever. But that's the way to keep up is sandyrios.com.
Okay.
So,
Sandy, RIOS.
RIOS. Oh, and could I also? I'll just mention this because I know we're going to be talking about it on the day that my new book launches, and that's God's Velvet Hammer. But that's out, and of course, it's available for pre-order. It's fun, Tim. I'm fun. I don't know how much fun it's going to be, but fasten your seatbelts. There's a lot of interviews coming up. And one last thing that I told you privately, but I will say if it's all right with you, I'm going to be joining Newsmax as a contributor. So that's those are all the latest things that are happening, and Sandy Rios 24/7 is, of course, central to all of that. And I'm
Fred?
so proud. I'm still part of American Family Radio. I just want people to know that remains. That has not changed.
Yes.
Oh.
Sandy's autobiography is coming out. Well, it's out now, right, Sandy?
Yeah, is that what you're
Well,
saying?
no.
It's out now?
No, it's available for pre-order on Amazon
Oh, okay.
right now. But the February the 14th, I think we're going to be actually talking about the book.
We are.
which
You're
that's
going to be
gonna
all over
fun.
American Family Radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Well,
get
anyway,
ready.
But that's February the 14th. But right now you can pre-order it on Amazon.
So God's Velvet Hammer is the title of it. Fred, you had a question for Sandy?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back for a moment to the environment inside the FBI. Sandy, do you believe that there are orders to FBI agents targeting conservatives, Christians? We are seeing it manifested, and you know all the examples. But do they really believe that Christians, that conservatives are a threat? Because Joe Biden has tried to paint us as the enemy. Do those FBI agents really believe that, so that when they go and surround the house of a pro-life leader, they believe they're doing something good?
Well, think of it this way, Fred. It's a transition. So when this first started, it's taken a while. Mueller, this really started under Mueller, I have to tell you. And and George W. Bush appointed him. So that's how far back this goes. There began to be a shift, and the shift has continued. So what that means is you have some agents who are the old guard, like Bruce was. He began to see things. If he had stayed in, he would have been in big trouble, I'm telling you. And so a lot of them just eventually kind of moved out. And of course, Mueller purged a lot of the old-timers who were old-timers. Let me put this in context. You have to leave the FBI at 57. You have to retire at 57. There's, the old-timers in their 50s who were experts at Islam, experts on what happened on 9/11, were all over that. They got purged. They got offered big money to retire because they wanted people in that they could control. That was the next phase. And so what's happening now is, under Christopher Wray, who knows what this man is all about? Oh, I should say under Comey, his favorite philosopher was Reinhard Niebuhr, who is, Ed, you probably know more about how to define him than I do, but he's a socialist leftist / communist. So Comey was not a good guy at all, and he started implementing some of this. Now under Wray, they are recruiting so many new people that have a completely different worldview. The FBI used to be the place where patriots went to save their country and fight crime. It's now like blue hair rings, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. It's a haven for that. And so you just think that what you see on campuses or what you see in our culture, that's what the FBI is concentrating on. They think differently. And yes, I think they knew probably some of them when they surrounded, say, Mark Houck's home, that Catholic dad, in the wee morning hours. Some of them probably had some conscience about it. But we're in transition so that less and less of them are going to have a conscience about it.
Christopher Wray, he's the current FBI director. Now, he did he say something? Do you remember when the Catholics in Richmond were under investigation? Conservative Catholics, Orthodox Catholics? by the FBI. Remember that
Yep.
story?
Yep.
And now he did. I don't know Christopher Wray, but he did under oath testified. Did he not rebuke that?
Well, he always gives a non-answer, Tim. I mean, he is a master. He's an attorney. Keep that in mind. He's not an FBI agent. He was a corporate attorney, and it has a long history with Comey and with Mueller and all their buddies. So he is a very masterful. His tongue is slick. His hair is great. You know, he knows how to handle it. He knows how to
didn't strike me as a radical leftist, is what I'm saying.
Well, that's the point. That's good, isn't it, right? If you're going to try to deceive people and pollute and turn some institution, you don't want to look like a radical or act like one.
Yeah.
But that is what he's doing, Tim. No matter how nice he seems, he's not nice.
I have a question. Last year, in the middle of his presidential campaign, then candidate Vivek Ramaswamy said a couple of times, and got national attention for this, he threw out the idea of shutting down the FBI and getting rid of a lot of the federal workforce. I think he might have thrown out the idea of some sort of FBI alternative or creating one. Is shutting down the FBI the best thing to do, or just try to reform it?
Chris, I don't feel like I can declare on that. I'll just tell you that some of my really good friends, Mike Waller's one of them. He's the one we interviewed on what's happened to the FBI and the CIA, and I trust Mike. And I have other friends too, same, that are in that sphere, besides my husband, who believe it should be shut down and that it's gained too much power and it's too late and we can't go back. I think I've always thought, Bruce and I have talked about this, but I don't know that we are in a position to say it's just too big. You'd have to know more. But it seems to me if we could bring in former agents and have them and get rid of the cesspool that's there, you could reform it. You'd have to do a whole... And by the way, what he's talking about is Schedule F. Schedule F, it was something President Trump was going to implement, and that was the ability to fire federal workers. You have probably no idea how big the federal government is and what an enemy those agencies are to the American people. And it just keeps growing. And so Schedule F is that's the silver bullet that the left doesn't want anyone to implement. So that's what he was talking about.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. I know President Trump said a couple of weeks ago he wants to build a big, new, spectacular building for the FBI in Washington. And I'm going, dude, excuse me, I would never call the former president dude, but I'm going, what are you thinking, man? The whole conservative movement is objecting to what the FBI is doing. You don't need to be encouraging them right now. But anyway, we'll see.
I don't get that.
Yeah.
But I don't get that. The only thing I could say is just that, they're supposed to be building in Maryland. The Congress would not fight over that. The conservatives in the Congress.
Well, I
the
think,
leaders.
Yeah, I do think there's something to be said for moving some of these agencies out of Washington, D.C., and Northern Virginia, and moving them to where...
I do too.
Excuse me, the English, where real people live.
Right.
Yeah,
And-
no,
huh?
I totally agree with you, Tim. The problem with this is they gave them so much money that they're planning on building a complex larger than the Pentagon under the current leadership. That's what we don't want.
I would, in the words of George H.W. Bush, I would say to them, not gonna do it.
Wouldn't be prudent.
Or is that Dana Carvey?
Yeah.
Not,
That's Dana Carvey doing H.W. Bush.
not gonna do it.
Right.
I get them mixed up.
Yeah, I
too.
know,
don't
right?
Yeah.
All right, Sandy Rios 24/7. And what's your website, Sandy?
SandyRios.com. And you can sign up for the mailing list. I can't even talk.
And pre-order the book, God's Velvet Hammer, which will
you
be
guys.
released
Yeah.
on February 14th. And we will have Sandy right back here on this show, and she'll be on other shows here on American Family Radio that day.
Thank you, guys.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you,
You're so
Sandy.
sweet.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim. My pleasure.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, we're going to take a short time out right here for news from our American Family Radio news team. Then we'll be back for more of today's issues on AFR.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Hey, have you seen the AFR logo canvas duffel bag? There's plenty of room in the main compartment for big stuff, a front pocket for those smaller items, and a mesh pocket for your water bottle to help you stay hydrated. Double reinforced handles and an adjustable shoulder strap make it easy to carry, and the logo on the side is a great way to let others know about AFR. They're available now at resources.afa.net.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Talks between Democrats and Republicans on a border reform bill could be on the rocks. Chad Pergram has the latest from Capitol Hill.
Salvaging the border bill may in fact need a prayer. This is the first time the president and the speaker have been in the same room at the prayer breakfast since a big meeting at the White House last month. Neither addressed the border today. Chances to pass the bill have dimmed. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell believes there's still a chance to get a deal, but it's looking less likely a majority of Senate Republicans are on board. Lawmakers from both sides are exasperated at the election year politics looming over the bill. Meantime, the House is focusing on impeachment of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Conservatives are applauding the new speaker for moving ahead on Mayorkas.
South Dakota Governor Christine Holmes says the border is a war zone, and it's Joe Biden's fault.
We need the president to do something about it. Listen, U.S. senators have been talking about fixing immigration for decades, and we see completely different consequences from who's in the White House. Under President Trump, we built a wall. We had a Remain in Mexico policy. There were dozens of policies that made a difference and gave us a secure border. It's very different under Joe Biden. We're seeing unprecedented illegal immigration. It's coming into this country as an invasion. It is a war zone down there.
President Biden's plan to visit to East Palestine, Ohio this month has been met with mixed response. It's been over a year since a train derailed there and spilled toxic chemicals in the ground and air. Kelly Saberi reports from East Palestine.
Some residents tell me the president is welcome, but they hope that this won't be just a campaign stop for him. Meanwhile, the mayor, Trent Conaway, tells me that he's worried about how other people will receive the visit. He says that they might not give him open arms like the other residents that urged him to write a formal invitation to the White House for him to visit. The EPA and local government told residents they were safe to return to their homes less than a week after the derailment happened. In addition to construction and cleanup signs, one indication of how life has changed here can be observed after a storm rolls through. There is a unique smell that lingers here, and it's not of a fresh rain. The moisture makes the air smell like a paint factory.
Tech executives testified before Congress about the negative effects of social media on teenagers as parents whose children had been victimized by online predators were in attendance. Maureen Molak is the mother of a cyberbullying victim from San Antonio, Texas.
You don't know that they're going to be safe. Okay, that's great. You put them on that, you allow them to be on that platform. Is it safe for your kids?
A legal scholar says it appears that Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar could have violated her oath of office during a recent speech. Chad Groening has more.
Omar has once again embroiled herself in controversy when during a speech in her native language, she told a Somali audience that, quote, "We are an organized society, brothers and sisters, people of the same blood, people who know they are Somalis first, Muslims second, who protect one another." Several members of Congress are demanding that she resign, and Republican Majority Whip Tom Emmer of Minnesota is calling for an ethics investigation. In response, Omar's attempted to defuse the situation, claiming that translation is not accurate. Ken Kulkowski is a former Justice Department counsel. He weighed in on the controversy during an appearance on Washington Watch on American Family Radio.
The general tenor, unless it was the grossest of mistranslation, unless it is just deliberate deception, she was speaking of herself, it appears, as a Somali more than an American.
And Kulkowski says as a naturalized citizen in 2000, Omar took an oath.
In that oath, she swore that she would reject all foreign allegiances and that she would give her allegiance first and foremost to the United States of America.
And he says she took another oath when she became a member of Congress,
which charges her to be a representative of the hundreds of thousands of people in her district of Minnesota, not any particular religious or ethnic group. Her job is to represent the people of her district and no one else.
I'm Chad Groening.
More news online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Forget about Facebook.
The last 10 days we've been banned twice, and is unbanning a word?
They put us under the ban. Christians and conservatives
don't need you, YouTube.
Banned one day, banned again.
AFR programs are now live streaming on the AFA streaming app. Now you can get shows like Today's Issues straight from the source.
Put back on the next.
Just say unbanned.
Unbanned.
Just search AFA Streaming or visit streaming.afa.net to sign up. Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Deep State Today on American Family Radio, where we interview people who control and run the deep state. Coming up next, I'm not going to say a name because I don't want them deep stating me.
Swamp is strong.
Or deep sixing you.
Yeah. Huh?
Or deep sixing you.
Right. Or never to be heard from again.
That's right. Or sleeps with the fishes or anything else.
All right. You're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Tim, Ed, Fred, and now Steve Paisley Jordan joins us. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning. The swamp is strong with
swamp.
this one.
We laugh, and it is what do you do, right? But we all know we have a war going on over the future of our country. It's a political war, it's an ideological war, and it's a spiritual war.
That's right.
Yep. And we talk about all three on here. Mm-hmm. But first and foremost for us is the spiritual aspect, because we are a Christian ministry and a Christian radio network, and there's good versus evil, and it's been around since
Garden of Eden.
Actually, since Satan challenged God and was cast down, I suppose, before the Garden of Eden, right?
Steve just went up to you there, Ed.
Just got to contradict me on national radio.
Well, I'm talking about between human
right,
and the human world.
That's what I was talking
about.
Yeah. But
so
Steve is technically correct.
Yeah,
that's right. The devil he started it.
Right.
He started this.
That's what Adam said.
But
that's right. Not my fault.
Our country, but we're as Sandy Rios talked about last hour, it is, Fred, we are in a critical time in America in terms of, are we going to turn away from our traditions, our history, our heritage, the reason our founding fathers started this country in the first place, that is individual liberty and freedom and human rights and freedom of conscience and freedom of speech and freedom of religion, freedom of commerce, freedom to travel. All those things that I just mentioned in many places in the world are not allowed. And that's the history of humankind, is kings and tyrants and dictators. And so this experiment, 200-year plus experiment, 200, what are we now, 40-something years, whatever it is in self-governance.
Yep.
That's at stake.
You mentioned something very critical in all of this. What is happening in America today has happened before. We have history of countries, of leaders who have all gone this direction and destroys. Ed, you wrote an article many years ago for the Journal, and you were quoting someone who looked at the ingredients that lead up to the fall of a country. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. That was, boy, that may be 15 years ago. That was, I read a couple of books that were oddly enough hard to get. I found them in print. One was J.D. Unwin. Mm-hmm. He was a anthropologist, a British anthropologist, and Peter M. Sorokin, who was the founder of the sociology department at Harvard University. Both of them had written books. Unwin his book was in 1934. Sorokin's was in 1956, I want to say. And they both independently, both of them were secularists, evolutionists, so on and so forth, but they examined what leads to the fall, the decay, and eventual fall of a culture, and whether or not cultures, when they're in the process of decaying, can reverse course.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating. They both said with regularity that was, one of them said, I forget the exact word, but he said it happened so often it became boring. They both found, after studying 80 different cultures from big to small, that when a society moves away from monogamous marriage, they begin the process of decay.
Yeah.
And they said it was with such regularity, they said it's impossible to ignore this. And they said usually it takes 3 generations for sexual laxity to take hold in a culture, and then they can't reverse.
Yeah.
Okay. And they said that the only cultures that were able to reverse course were those that had a group, there's usually a small group, that held firm to the ideas that led to their culture's greatness and ascendancy. They had to hold to those beliefs, including monogamous marriage, and suffer ridicule and rejection and isolation and sometimes even violence if they would hold fast to those views and not join the party, okay, of sexual laxity. The culture could be reversed, because what would happen is, in the course of the consequences of decay, the majority of people would turn to this group and say, you said something about why this was a bad idea. We want to hear from you.
Yeah.
But if that group joined the party or abandoned their beliefs, there was no hope for the culture. When I read that, when I was researching for that article, I wrote a couple of articles on this, I almost came out of my skin, because it was as if they were quoting Jesus saying Christians have to be salt and light in a culture or else. And these guys were not Christians.
Yeah.
So Christians have to remain committed to what the Bible says, even though they, like we do, get rejected, isolated, call names, and in some cases there's even violence. It really is an extraordinary couple of books that I read for that. And this is what AFA does and AFR does.
Exactly. Hold strong.
Hey, yes, on a political level, just a minute, Steve. We do care that you're here, and we are gonna ask you to get into the news in just a minute.
Sure.
But I wanted to say this: you were commenting there on the spiritual. Of course, everything in the world is spiritual, and if you look at the Bible, one way or another, except, well, you know what I'm saying,
right?
Not everything, but
it's linked to spiritual realities.
The worldview clashes that are going on around the globe. But I want to encourage people, because I think as we go on here, elections are going to be, we need to focus as much on statewide elections as we do national elections. I know a presidential election gets a lot of attention, as well it should. But, pardon me, but we need to elect good state legislators, obviously city councilmen, but especially state legislators and lieutenant governors and attorney generals and governors. I think these are going to be more and more important as we go on here, because you see what's happening in Texas. And I know some people have been critical of Abbott. He should have done what he's doing now 2 years ago. But I think you see what happened during COVID. Everybody pounced on DeSantis down in Florida because he opened up the state, saying, "Hey, he's opening up too early. He's killing people." He said, "No, we're not gonna have this. What do you call it? A medical, whatever he had a term for it." But I'm giving you 2 examples: Abbott, DeSantis, Kemp opened up during COVID earlier. There's some other governors that did a good job of that. but I just remember the whole world came down on DeSantis, basically saying death Santas and all this. But I'm saying that it's becoming more clear that we're going to need governors who stand up to the federal government.
Right.
And that's probably the issues where that's going to come to the fore are probably going to get more and more numerous.
Yeah.
And more important. What I'm saying. So state legislature, and let's think about it. This is why we encourage young people to go to the Patriot Academy and to get involved in law and government and politics, because usually you look at somebody who becomes the governor of a state, they usually started down at the city council level,
right,
or county commissioner, and that's the way it works in America. And you work you work yourself up, and so that's why we encourage Christian young people. Look at Patriot Academy, Rick Green runs. That's a wonderful organization. We promote them. They train Christian conservative young people on how to go into politics, how to run campaigns, how to win races, how to get elected, how to promote good policy, all these things. So I'm just saying that.
By the way, it works in reverse too.
Go ahead.
I was looking at Gavin Newsom.
What works in reverse?
That on the left, people start off on the bottom of the political spectrum too. Gavin Newsom started off. He's the governor of California now. Started off a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, then became the mayor of San Francisco, lieutenant governor of California, and then governor. So anybody who wants to start in politics in this country has to start at the bottom, and we are encouraging Christians to get involved in starting at the bottom.
You wonder why people say, I hear the question, what in the world does the government have to do with marriage? Why do they have to be involved? Just go to your church, go wherever.
What now?
Why does the government have to be involved in marriage? Why do we have to do this? Go to your church, get married, but keep the government out of it. But this discussion right here, to me, signals why it's in the national interest to have public policy that supports marriage and discourages single parenthood, other than marriage relationships, because if that falls, like you were saying, Ed, the country falls. So that's the reason why the government needs to be involved in these things, because they need to make public policy that supports marriage to help save the country.
Right.
Brad, anything to say here? Or?
No, it all goes back, George Barna, through the years, has given the ingredients of a Christian worldview. It's really important. The Bible is God's word. You start there. That truth does not vary. Biblical truth does not vary. God doesn't change his mind about things. And as we're discussing with Ed, there is historic proof that if you stand on God's word, God is going to bless this. I go back to the Babylonian captivity, Daniel and his three friends, and there were others. They stood their grounds. When it came to Cyrus being the leader at that point, and he said, I'm going to let some of the Jews go back to that land to rebuild once again. God was involved with all of this. But there needs to be that example out there, as Ed was talking about, however small it is. No, we're going to stand our grounds because we believe in the God of the Bible, and the God of the Bible doesn't change.
And what's fascinating about the study that I did is a lot of the cultures that these two individuals studied, they weren't even Christian. A lot of them were pagan, but they were doing things and building their society the way God intended people to build.
Yes.
As Steve was mentioning, with marriage and monogamous marriage being the foundation of culture, even if you don't know God, if you do, in other words, you can still prosper financially by following the principles of the book of Proverbs, even if you don't know the book of Proverbs exists, because this is the way God founded the human race, and this is the way we're supposed to behave.
That's right.
Hey, a couple of victories to point out that's taken place the last day or two is Governor DeSantis in Florida, of course, the former Republican candidate who withdrew from the presidential race, and is backing. Said he endorsed former President Trump. Anyway, he went back to Florida to be governor, and he keeps racking up wins. Yesterday, he won against Disney in the federal court. What, you remember that?
Yeah.
Governor DeSantis and the state legislature in there, Florida, had passed a law where they said you cannot teach sex to kids third grade in our state.
Or younger.
Or younger. And the media said they framed that the Don't Say Gay law. Remember that?
Yes. Still do.
So they still do. So the state of Florida and DeSantis, the governor there, said, okay, Disney, if you're gonna get involved in politics and take this position, then we're going to, then I don't know if this how it went down, but anyway, Disney had a lot of favoritism that they had traditionally been shown in and around the Orlando area.
Yeah.
And the state of Florida and the legislature there and Governor DeSantis basically challenged their special treatment. I'm generalizing here and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't know all the details. So Disney came back and said, oh yeah, you're punishing political speech. And so I'm just saying yesterday, at least, this may be appealed. Yesterday, at least, a federal judge ruled in favor of Governor DeSantis and the state of Florida in this case. The second thing that happened there in Florida was Governor DeSantis. I know it seems like I'm saying his name a lot, but he's like Tom Brady in football. He just wins, okay? Yesterday, or 2 days ago, he announced that that you're not going to be able in the state of Florida on your driver's license to pick your gender.
Wow.
He said in the state of Florida, your gender on your driver's license is what you're born as. And of course, the left's all upset about that too. So I'm just saying there's some good news. We mentioned Governor Abbott standing up in Texas. That's good news. There's some good things happening on a state level, primarily around the country. On this broader topic, the founding fathers of our country, they warned us, and they set up structures in place to help us avoid centralized power. You centralize power, human nature being what it is, you're going to end up with tyranny, and you're going to end up with dictatorships, and you're going to end up with, and they may be done in the name of doing good. What politician in Washington says, hey, I want to tear down America. Who's with me? You know what I'm saying? But
You'd be surprised.
You start centralizing. Well, that's true, Steve. You start centralizing power in Washington, D.C., like we've seen happen in the last couple of decades. And President Reagan was steadfastly against this. He stood against this. Remember that? That's when you're going to have more problems with the federal government. Because if you centralize power and the wrong people get in charge, they're going to do what Sandy Rios was talking about the last half hour.
That's right.
So we need to get back to separation of powers and letting the states run their own business for the most part.
Yeah.
Unless you've got some kind of obvious constitutional issues. But that's what we're going to have to get back to. That's why we have 50 state governments.
Right.
You know, because our founding fathers did not want the federal government controlling everything. From Washington, D.C. All right, you're listening to. Does anybody got anything? Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Thank you.
Absolutely, and stop taking money stop being dependent on the federal government for money. That's one of the things that has corrupted our education system. The federal government started dealing out billions of dollars to school districts, and then they said things like, "Okay, we're going to stop giving you money for your meal program unless you follow our liberal agenda."
Right.
We have to be so careful of that.
Oh, yeah. And, that's a problem, too, because federal government, there's no state government in America that can print money. The United States federal government can borrow money and print money, and that's going to eventually catch up with us in a bad way. But I don't know when that's going to happen. But you can't keep. I wouldn't think you could keep going into debt.
Nope.
Infinitely and not have to suffer the consequences of it. All right, Steve.
Hey.
What is your first story?
Well, there was a remarkable hearing on Capitol Hill yesterday with tech CEOs in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And the Senate, and this was broadly bipartisan, wanted to figure out why they had a whole bunch of families whose kids had been harmed by social media, either committed suicide because of bullying on there or had pictures, the inappropriate pictures spread around or whatever. And the government, the senators wanted to know why this was happening. There was a remarkable exchange between Josh Hawley, the Missouri congressman, and Mark Zuckerberg.
Senator. Josh Hawley's a senator.
I'm sorry, yes, senator. My bad. But let me set this up by saying they were talking about the proliferation of hashtags on Instagram that let predators find child sex abuse images. So there's kind of a dark back corner of the social media world. And they wanted to know why there wasn't more restrictions against it, or why you didn't take it off. And so Josh Hawley put up a picture of a splash screen, a page that comes up. If you put one of these hashtags up, or you look for the do a search on child sexual abuse images, they get a splash screen that comes up. It has two options. One, you can say, it says these results may contain images of child sexual abuse. Do you want to get resources, or do you want to see the image anyway? That did not go real well for Mr. Zuckerberg. Let's listen to, I think it's cut 8.
Will you take personal responsibility?
Nope, not cut 8.
Senator, I view my job and the job of...
This is it's awkward silence.
Yeah, I know, right?
You're going to have to tell us to go
Oh,
on without
cut
you.
9,
or-
cut 9.
Cut 9.
Mr. Zuckerberg, what were you thinking? In what sane universe is there a link for C results anyway?
Well, because we might be wrong.
It appears that you're trying to be the premier sex trafficking
Of course
site
not, Senator.
in this country.
Senator, that's ridiculous.
No,
Senator,
it is not ridiculous.
we-
Why don't you take it down?
We do take it
We
down.
are here discussing.
We do more
need
work to
you
take it
all
down
to
than-
work
than-
with
than-
us. No, you're not.
Have you apologized to the victims? They're here. You're on national television. Would you like now to apologize to the victims who have been harmed by your product? Show them the pictures. Would you like to apologize for what you've done to these good people?
He did. He stood up, turned around.
Zuckerberg did?
Yes, and apologized to the families in the audience that had lost kids.
Yeah. Social media is a very dangerous place. The only part of those kinds of hearings, and we didn't hear the whole thing, but I don't like it when, and it doesn't matter whether it's a Democrat or Republican, but I don't like it when they ask questions of the witness and then they don't give them a chance to respond.
I know we talked about that, and I had actually we can't play it now, but there is I did bring in a cut of a question and his response to it.
Okay, maybe you can do that.
Yeah, we can do
Well,
it tomorrow.
can you do it tomorrow?
Well, I'll play it
Tomorrow
offline.
we're educating America.
Trivia Friday.
That's right. All right, so thank you, Steve.
Are there some stories on that issue on American Family News?
Yes, a story I wrote that's running today.
All right.
On this hearing, yeah.
Go to AFN.
AFN.net.
.net.
Where you're safe.
Yes.
AFN.net is a safe place.
Search
right?
for anything you want on AFN.net.
Unless you're a liberal.
You might get triggered.
All right, Fred, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ed, thank you. My thanks to Sandy Rios and Christopher Woodward and Brent Creeley, our producer. Trivia Friday tomorrow. We'll see you back here then.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Spiritual Heritage Tours with AFA President Tim